Hello there, fun kids. Now, I'm Chris Packham, and you might recognise me if you watch Wildlife TV, as I'm lucky enough to present the BBC Spring Watch and Autumn Watch. Now, there's been a report in the news saying that young people are not getting outside and enjoying nature as much as they could be. So today, I want to give you a few top tips on how you can get outside and enjoy nature just as much as I do. Here's a tip for you. Why don't you ask your parents if you can walk to school? Now, many schools have walking groups supervised by rotas of parents, so see if you can join in with one of these. You never know what you might spot on your way to the playground. Now, as you're walking to school, note what's around you. Now, there could be leaves falling off the trees, or there could be leaves growing on them. You know, stay in touch with the seasons. That'll tell you what's happening in the wild world. You could even pick up some of those leaves and stick them in a scrapbook. Start a collection of leaves and feathers, natural things you find on your walk to school. During break times, why don't you explore your school grounds if your school's lucky enough to have them? Many schools do have green areas. Maybe you just play football on the playground. Maybe you just stand in the corner talking about this and that you saw on TV last night. Why not, when it's dry and don't get muddy feet, go over and have a look underneath the trees, behind some of the bushes and the shrubs there. You never know what you might find. Some school grounds are absolutely packed with wildlife. If your parents have a dog and your parents therefore take it for a walk, why don't you go with them a bit more often? It's a great way to have fun with your parents and your pet, and to see what's going on in the parks and the places where they walk the dog around you. And at the end of the day, do remember, don't let your dog chase the wildlife. Don't want any of that. If you're lucky enough to have one, why don't you explore your garden? Take a second look. You might have been out there making camps in the summertime, maybe kicking a football about, playing a bit of badminton, whatever takes your fancy. But have you actually found out what's living behind your shed, or over by the fence, or underneath the rose leaves, or behind the tree in the front garden if you have one there? You know, gardens can be absolutely stuffed with wildlife. Also, take a look out the window. You never know which birds you might see flying by. Why not build, because you can build them yourself, or buy a bird feeder and hang it in your garden to attract a few species in. If you put it close to a window, you won't even need any binoculars. I've got a bird feeder at home. It's about that far from my window. I get absolutely cracking views of the birds whilst I'm having my breakfast and a cup of tea. At the weekend, why don't you ask your parents for a special treat to take you to a local nature reserve? There's bound to be one within just a few miles of your home. And if you do go at the weekend, there's bound to be people there who know plenty about the things that they're looking at. And don't be shy. These aren't nasty scientists that are all highbrow. They're going to be people like me who are only too keen to tell you what's what, because we want you to come on board and enjoy the wildlife as much as we do. Why not ask your parents if for your birthday or for Christmas they'll sign you up to one of our wildlife charities. For example, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the RSPB, or the Wildlife Trust. Both of these have young people's groups, young explorers and watch groups. It only costs a few pounds. You get magazines that come in the post with plenty of ideas, great pictures, information about wildlife, and of course you'll be invited to join in with that local group, which will get you out into the countryside. If you're lucky enough to go on holiday, think about where you're going in advance and maybe plan what you might see there. And if you're lucky enough to be going overseas, there could be all sorts of new animals in and around your hotel garden. So spend a few minutes away from the swimming pool. Just take a walk around and see what you can find. Some possibly very exciting insects if you've gone somewhere hot, or some really exotic birds too. As a kid, I was always taken to watch the local football, and I liked it. I'm a keen football fan, but I was easily distracted, so I used to keep a bird list. Now, this is a list of all of the birds that I saw where Southampton football team played their football. For those of you who are into it, initially the Dell, latterly St Mary's, and I kept a list. Do you know what? I even saw an osprey flying over a somewhat tedious game of football at the Dell once. But it doesn't have to be a football ground. If you keep a list, it will teach you to look for new things, identify new things, and keep track of what's coming and going in your space, whether it's the football ground or your own back garden. So there's a few tips on what you might do to get closer to nature. Now, I think the closer you get to it, the more you enjoy it. And when I say close, I mean close. I mean perhaps touching it, certainly hearing it and watching it, sometimes smelling it and sometimes even feeling it. I think that unless you get out there, occasionally you get scratched and stung, you get a bit of mud on you, you'll never develop a real passion, a real love for wildlife. And that love needs to come from your heart, not the hard drive on your computer. So switch it off and go outside.